A modern and fast lifestyle often makes us forget about problems that concern us all. Summer, which is already here, brings us images of sandy beaches, coconut trees, and waves in the ocean, yet those same images remind us that maybe we should think about our planet more. So much so that we should actually be worried about losing it sooner than we think. For small island nations, this is a very real problem, and they are in a fight against nature for their land. Meet Tuvalu. Tuvalu, formerly the Ellice Islands, is a country in the west-central Pacific Ocean. Tuvalu is composed of 3 reef islands and 6 atolls scattered in a chain lying approximately northwest to southeast over a distance of some 676 kilometers. The total land area of the islands of Tuvalu is 26 square kilometers. The first inhabitants of Tuvalu were Polynesians. The de facto capital is the village of Vaiaku, where most government offices are located. It is on Fangafale Islet, a constituent part of Funafuti Atoll. Together with what is now Kiribati, Tuvalu formed the British Gilbert and Ellice Islands colony before separately gaining its independence in 1978. The islands are low-lying, most being 4 to 5 meters above sea level. There are no rivers. Rainfall and wells provide the only fresh water. Because the soils are porous, agriculture is limited. Coconut palms thrive and breadfruit trees, pandanus, taro, and bananas are grown. Pigs and chickens are raised and seabirds, fish, and shellfish are caught for food. The islands increasingly depend on imported food. So far, Tuvalu sounds like a standard island nation, so what can trouble this paradise on Earth as probably most of us imagine it? If you want to know how this faraway part of the world is a harsh reminder for the rest of us, stay until the end of the video and consider liking and subscribing. Tuvalu could be one of the first nations to be significantly impacted by rising sea levels due to global climate change. Not only could parts of the islands be flooded, but the rising saltwater table could also destroy deep-rooted food crops such as coconut, pulaka, and taro. Research from the University of Auckland suggests that Tuvalu may remain habitable over the next century. However, as of March 2018, Prime Minister Inela Sopuaga stated that Tuvalu is not expanding and has gained no additional habitable land. Sopuaga has also said that evacuating the islands is the last resort. One day will disappear. Tuvalu's sinking islands. Tuvalu is sinking is the local catch-all phrase for the effects of climate change on this tiny island archipelago on the front line of global warming. 2 of Tuvalu's 9 islands are on the verge of going under, swallowed by sea rise and coastal erosion. Most of the islands sit barely 3 meters above sea level, and at its narrowest point, Fangafale stretches just 20 meters across. During storms, waves batter the island from the east and west, swallowing the country, in the words of the locals. Many say they have nightmares that the sea will soon gobble them up for good, and not just as a distant fear in their slumber, but by the next generation. Scientists predict Tuvalu could become uninhabitable in the next 50 to 100 years. Locals say they feel it could be much sooner. The United Nations Development Program classifies Tuvalu as resource-poor, least developed country that is extremely vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Porous, salty oil has made the ground almost totally useless for planting, destroying staple pulaka crops and decreasing the yields of various fruits and vegetables. Starchy Pacific Island staples such as taro and cassava now have to be imported at great expense along with most other food. Since the rising ocean contaminated underwater ground supplies, Tuvalu is now totally reliant on rainwater, and droughts are occurring with alarming frequency. Even if the locals could plant successfully, there is now not enough rain to keep even simple kitchen gardens alive. Climate-related illnesses that have increased on par with the changing weather include influenza, fungal diseases, conjunctivitis, and dengue fever, according to the hospital's research. Higher daily temperatures are also putting people at daily risk of dehydration, heat stroke, and heat rashes. Enemy of Tuvalu. Climate change in Tuvalu is particularly threatening for the long-term habitability of the island state of Tuvalu. This is because the average height of the islands is less than 2 meters or 6.6 feet above sea level, with the highest point of New Lakita being about 4.6 meters or 15 feet above sea level. The sea level at the Funafuti tide gauge has risen at 3.9 millimeters per year, which is approximately twice the global average. The sea level in Tuvalu varies as a consequence of a wide range of atmospheric and oceanographic influences. Sea level rise. There are observable changes that have occurred over the last 10 to 15 years that show Tuvaluans that there have been changes to sea levels. Those observable changes include seawater bubbling up through the porous coral rock to form pools on each high tide, and flooding of low-lying areas, including the airport, on a regular basis during spring tides and king tides. Several causes of coastal flooding in Tuvalu have been identified, including sand mining, paving of surface areas, and manipulation of coastlines, in addition to high seas caused by meteorological and climatological forces. Ecosystems. Ocean acidification was projected to continue in 2011. The reefs at Funafuti have suffered damage, with 80% of the coral having been bleached as a consequence of the increase of the ocean temperatures and acidification from increased levels of carbon dioxide. The coral bleaching, which includes staghorn corals, is attributed to the increase in water temperature that occurred during the El Niños that occurred from 1999 to 2000 and from 2000 to 2001. How climate change affects entire nations. Atoll nations are characterized by subsurface freshwater reserves that are sensitive to sea level rise and drought, putting populations at risk of serious water shortages. Climate change is also affecting agricultural production, leading to food shortages and internal migrations. On small islands, movements will soon require communities and individuals to move across borders. These factors could threaten fundamental criteria of statehood as defined by the Montevideo Convention, a permanent population. The whole situation has dire impacts on housing and long-term habitability, as well as health impacts. Climate change in Tuvalu is expected to cause the prevalence of various diseases to increase, including diarrheal and respiratory disease, as well as lead to compromised food security. Economic impacts are evident in agriculture. Pulaka, a crop grown in Tuvalu, hit salination due to saltwater intrusion and decreasing fisheries population. Climate change is expected to lead to inadequate potable water due to less rainfall and prolonged droughts. Hope for Tuvalu. A research study from the University of Auckland used satellite imagery to measure Tuvalu's changing land area over 4 decades. Between 1971 and 2014, it showed the country grew by more than 73 hectares, or 2.9%. Each period of the study experienced net increases in land area, including the most recent decade. Of Tuvalu's individual islands, 73 had increased in land area, while 28% had decreased. Just 1 had eroded entirely. Tuvalu's population is spread across 9 of its largest islands, with about 50% of its people living on Fogafale in the Funafuti Atoll. These larger islands generally experience the greatest increases in land size, while Tuvalu's smaller, uninhabited islands fared the worst. The study looked at Tuvalu's 2 island types, atolls and reef platforms. Though both are formed from coral reefs, atolls are ring-shaped formations of islets or islands surrounding a lagoon, whereas reef platform islands are solid, single structures. Their expansion, the study suggests, is the result of sediment, corals, and other debris being washed ashore by storms and waves. And according to this same study, if sea levels continue to rise at current rates, the land may be able to naturally adapt to these changes. While that study gives us some hope, it also implies as well that a lot depends on the circumstances and workings of nature, over which we as humans do not have direct control. What we can say for sure is that the case of Tuvalu is a real eye-opener in every aspect. Where and how do we go from here on? It is true that these are results of our neglect and carelessness. What are your thoughts on this matter? Share them with us in the comments section, and see you all in the next video.